What is MIDI? I first want the biggest MIDI misconception out of the way. MIDI is a unified communication protocol, not a cable type. Often when people call something a MIDI cable, they are referring to a 5-pin tin cable. Prior to MIDI over USB, this was the most common type of cable used for MIDI. So, what is MIDI? MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface and is a unified language used to communicate between devices and/or software from different manufacturers. It can be sent over a variety of cables, including, but not limited to, 5-pin DIN, USB, Firewire, Ethernet, TRS jack and probably any other cable that has at least 3 wires. It can also be sent within the digital domain. So, I mean, inside of your computer. Very important to know is that MIDI and audio are two totally different things. A MIDI signal does not carry audio and an audio signal does not carry MIDI. Although in some cases a device might send both MIDI and audio over USB. Still, the signals will be separate, but they will be sent over the same cable. With analog sound generators, this means there needs to be an analog to digital converter built in the device itself. So please check the manual of that device before assuming it transmits MIDI over USB. When using a 5-pin DIN connection, note that the MIDI signal is not bidirectional and that 2 cables might be needed to send signals back and forth between devices. A good general practice is to never assume the kind of signal based upon the type of connection. Always read the input and output labels on the device and check the manual. So, how can MIDI be used? First, we need to have an understanding of what kind of communication signals MIDI contains in order to put it into practice. The most common is pitch and gate. Pitch refers to the kind of note is played, and gate is the moment and length a key is pressed. Applications could include the use of a sequencer or keyboard to control a hardware or software sound generator, like a synthesizer. Another common signal is clock, reset, start and stop. These signals are useful in the interaction and synchronization between sequencers and your music composing software, often referred to as a DAW, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation. MIDI signals can get really deep and complex. Control changes, or CCs, control parameters like knob positions or other values. Program changes can be used to select presets. Sysecs can be used to reconfigure a whole set of parameters or even an entire internal configuration. To make things even more vast, all these signals can be sent over 16 different channels per connection in total. In practice, you could control 16 different daisy-chained synths with a sequencer and have them each receive different signals on their dedicated channel. Of course, that sequencer needs to be able to send MIDI data to 16 different channels. In order to daisy-chain different devices, you start by connecting the MIDI out of the controller or sequencer to the MIDI in of the receiving device. From there, you connect the MIDI through of that receiving device to the MIDI in of the next receiving device, and so on. If your device doesn't have a MIDI through port, that device will be the end of the daisy chain. MIDI thru only passes the signal received at the MIDI in of the same device and does not contain the data of the MIDI out of that same device. You can assign a different MIDI channel to every device to receive the corresponding MIDI data, or put them all on the same channel if they need to receive the same data. A MIDI signal deteriorates over distance, so it's not advised to actually daisy chain 16 devices or use cables that are extremely long. If your sequencer or MIDI interface has multiple outputs, it's better to divide devices over these outputs. So, if you have 4 MIDI outs and want to control 16 devices, it would be better for each MIDI out to have 4 daisy chain devices instead of 16 on one out. Some devices might be multi-timbral. This means they can simultaneously receive MIDI on different channels and work like multiple instruments in one. Again, check your device's manual to see if it's multi-timbral. Maybe it can do more than you thought. What's truly amazing is that MIDI has not changed in 40 years. It's a standard that's around since the 80s and it's here to stay. MIDI 2.0 was announced in the year 2020 and will expand on what's already there. The face of music production would not be the same today without MIDI. One of the biggest benefits is that you can record a performance and still change the sounds later on. MIDI and audio were two different things. Remember? Software instruments are controlled via MIDI. MIDI has even been used in video games because it's very light on data when compared to the amount of data needed for audio. In one of my upcoming videos, I will do various MIDI setups and show you different configurations. So please subscribe to the channel and click the bell button to be notified when upcoming episodes are published. Thank you for watching.